Hi everyone, I'm Jane and I'm joining our Nourish community and St Christopher's Hospice on this really exciting Facebook and YouTube live session this Tuesday evening. And it's a gorgeous evening, it's dappled light outside and I'm in my home in Rutland where I live with my 17-year-old daughter and our dog called Kumi. Now, we're very excited about this event because I'm going to be talking about how we can nourish ourselves through these challenging times. And I know lots of you out in the St Christopher's community and also Nourish community have been challenged with so many different scenarios. So I'm going to cover a few of the areas where I'd love to inspire you and to nurture you and give you some of my ideas about what food can do to our bodies. But I just thought I'd start with a little bit of my story. So I am in my 50s. And I was brought up in a household which was a real foodie household. And it was really my great auntie May who was my inspirer. And she was the one that my sister and I always used to like to stay with because we used to sleep in her big squodgy beds and we get wafts of homemade jams and toast in the morning because she was a big foodie. So I grew up with that backdrop that food was evocative, food was sensual, and it wasn't just a function. And some people say they eat to live or they live to eat. And I'd say I definitely live to eat. So food was my background, but my dad, who's very poignant and very special to me, is a retired chemistry teacher. So it was a bit of the food side, a bit of the science side. And I thought I want to combine my fascination of the human body with a real love of food. So I went into dietetics at the age of 18, did my degree up in Leeds. But I was really flummoxed by the fact that, yes, we have amazing scientists out there, we have amazing medics, we have dietitians, but there seemed to be a lack of the real love of food. And as Lorna finds, she's an amazing dietitian at St Christopher's and it's great to be working as a team, is that food is evocative and it's something that we should be treating in a very sensual way. So we were taught at university if we had a low appetite or a swallowing difficulty, that what we needed to do was just take the normal meal, so whether that's roast beef, Yorkshire pudding, Brussels sprouts, bung it in liquidizer, and then serve it as one just bland looking mush. And I said, actually, I didn't want that. I didn't want that for me. I didn't want that for a loved one or any of my patients. So very quickly after my degree, I went and did my Cordon Bleu training. I trained as a chef because I really wanted to get back to my Auntie May roots and say, in different challenging scenarios, what can we eat and what can we cook, maybe for ourselves or for someone that we're looking after, that is really delicious and appetizing. So I did my Cordon Bleu training, and I'd also had a big trauma in my life between the ages of 15 and 25, and I'd spent about a quarter of my life in hospital. And so I'd been very on the receiving end of the sort of food and the sort of care that I thought, I want to do things differently. I really wanted to set up a practice where nurturing and delicious food was at the centre. So I set up my practice 30 years ago. I was going to say 50 years ago then. I'm feeling particularly jaded this Tuesday evening, but it's just 30 years ago. And I got to be known really as the food-loving nutritionist, even though clinically I'm a dietitian. But I was found by Jamie Oliver and we did the amazing school meals campaign. And he said, look, Jane, we're going to revolutionise young people's diets, the school children, and really show that we need to care about what we're putting inside our children's bodies. And that's an amazing project that still goes on now. And the legacy is that we've shown that even in challenging times in a school setting, we can find very economical, delicious food that can really start us on this path of nurturing small children. So I took part in that amazing campaign and then I started writing. So I wrote for different newspapers. So I wrote for the Times, the Observer, Mail on Sunday, and then I wrote for the Daily Mail for many years. Because I really believe that as much as I love seeing patients in my practice, I really love looking after families and individuals. But I also think there's a bigger piece that we need to play. And that's where writing can come in. So I started writing books and I wrote 9 books and one of them was called Nourish. So I've actually got a copy here and you'll see these are the eggs of our hens. And it's a beautiful word that when I'm sitting opposite someone, and particularly if you're going through a challenging time, we're not making false promise. We're not saying if you definitely eat this, it's going to achieve Y in your body. I love to nourish people. And whether you're going through a tough time with cancer treatment, or you're really bereaved and isolated, or you're just in deep, deep trauma, I love to be able to find the small things that can make a big difference, whether they soothe you, whether they give you energy, whether they support your immune system. I firmly believe, and this is why I've set up Nourish, and it's an amazing online community. You can find us. We've got recipes, we've got ideas, we've got a thriving community, because I think that nourishment can be really key to how we feel truly valued and how we give dignity to people that we care about. So we had some questions through today, and I thought I'd start with digestion, because we say that our gut is our second brain, and it really is a place that can feel great when we're feeling great, but equally it can be really feel traumatized when we're going through a lot. And we find that if we're going through either emotional trauma or physical trauma, or if we're going through a treatment, particularly with cancer treatments, what the cancer treatments do is they often attack the rapidly dividing cells. So the rapidly dividing cells we find on our skin. Our skin, of course, has to replenish itself very rapidly if we cut ourselves. Equally, our hair is where we get rapid growth when we're feeling really healthy. But our gut is where we feel the trauma. So the cancer treatment, equally, a lot of anxiety and emotions attack the rapidly dividing cells. And that means that our gut can be very traumatized, and often it can be bloated, it can feel uncomfortable, and it can cause constipation, it can cause diarrhea. And the shame is that often a lot of patients I've seen over the years, they say, look, if I'm going through trauma, surely what I need are vegetables and fruits, and the foods that we know to be rich in antioxidants. Now, antioxidants generally are the flavonoids, the vitamin C, different compounds within foods that protect our bodies, they protect our cells. So when we're wanting to be robust, we often say, right, let's go to our fresh fruits and vegetables. But when your gut's going through trauma, if you put a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables into your stomach, often you just lose them. You end up having to go to the loo really quickly, and you don't hold on to any of that goodness. So you might think you're doing yourself good, but in fact your body doesn't hold on to any of the goodness. So one little trick is that if you cook fruits and vegetables, they're generally easier to digest. So I'm probably known as the Bramley apple queen. So earlier today I cooked some Bramley apple puree. Simply just simmering, cooking apples. I use Bramleys because I like that quite tart taste. And you literally just simmer it in either a bit of apple juice, orange juice, or just water. And I quite like to put some cardamom seeds in, and we've got a recipe for this on our website. But apple puree contains pectin. Now, for those of you who make jam, you probably know that pectin is something that we use to make a jam set. So it's a very gentle, soothing substance that just sets the jams or the apple puree. So if you put apple puree inside your body when you're feeling traumatized, through all the years I've looked after patients, I found that's one of the most soothing things you can have when your gut's going through a tough time. Or it could equally be when you're feeling sick. And that could be grief or fear. And obviously there's been a lot of fear in the environment over the last few months. And often we say we feel sick to the stomach. But if you just try a little bit of apple puree, or it could equally be another one, it's rather like good old TV, something I prepared earlier. These are just cooked apricots, and I've cooked these just in a little bit of orange juice. And again, I keep them in the Kilner jars so that not only does it look appetizing when I go to the fridge, and that's a good trick too. If you're looking after someone who's got a poor appetite, often it's this sensual evocative, seeing things that turn us onto realizing we're going to be eating. So again, with the cooked apricots, that or the apple with a little bit of Greek yogurt can be something that's very soothing, and it also is easy to digest. Now, I've just brought up the subject of yogurt. Now, yogurt I love, and I tend to go for the full fat yogurt because I don't like generally low fat foods because they tend to be full of additives, preservatives, and sometimes you can get a lot of sugar in them. And it's not saying that sugar's bad, but you can just find that it spikes your energy levels and then you can get a bit of a crash. So I prefer to go for the full fat Greek style yogurt. And then that's a good way of getting a bit of added calcium, but also it's easier to digest generally than milk. But of course, if any of you have any problems digesting lactose, you can go for a non-dairy yogurt, and you can get fantastic coconut yogurts, soya yogurts. But I just say that combination with some fruit and some vegetables, that's a nice puree, is a really good way of getting that goodness inside your body that you're going to hold on to. So of course we've talked about fruits, but how about vegetables? So vegetables, generally if you've got a poor digestive system and if you're feeling really uncomfortable, vegetables like Brussels sprouts, cabbage, cauliflower, and the brassicas, they tend to be very wind producing. So I just say, watch out, don't go near those if you're really finding that your gut's very bloated. I tend to go more towards your root vegetables, or you could try asparagus at this time of year. And rather like the fruits, we tend to find that if they're cooked, they're easy to digest. So of course you can get your lovely broths, you can get your lovely soups, and you can have them as chilled soups, because it doesn't mean that everything has to be warm. It's just that if it's cooked, then you can chill it down. It's easier to digest than having a big plate of raw vegetables. So just maybe look at the type of method that you use. Is it cooking that you use and then chill it down? It's easier to digest rather than going for something that's very raw, very juice orientated. So if we move from the gut to a low appetite, a poor appetite, I'd love to share another trick with you. And that's one of my daughter Maya's favourite, because we're going to be talking about chocolate. Now, chocolate is something we often hear is a bad food, and that's absolute rubbish, because actually chocolate contains a substance called theobromine. Now, theobromine actually is a caffeine-like substance, but unlike having a strong coffee, you tend to get a small kick from some chocolate. Now, that's not the reason why I'm bringing it up. The reason is that theobromine within the chocolate relaxes your muscles in your esophagus, which is your feeding tube that leads and connects your mouth to your stomach. So if you've got a poor appetite, there's a couple of things you could try. Either, and this is the favourite, sucking just a small piece of chocolate. Just take a tiny piece, and it could be either a dark cocoa bean, high cocoa bean chocolate, or it could be a milk one if you find the sort of the darker cocoa a bit too strong. But suck on a little square of it, or alternatively, you could make a small hot chocolate. We've got a lovely recipe on our website, and that's nourish.by janeclarke.com. And what you do is literally, if you have a small little espresso cup size of the hot chocolate, it tends to just, it gives you a bit of an absorption of the sugar through the roof of the mouth, and you tend to think, right, I'm really looking forward to eating, because it persuades the brain to realise that it's going to be eating. But also the chocolate relaxes your muscles. And it means that then if you've been very tense in your stomach and your esophagus, the little bit of chocolate acts as the most delicious little aperitif. So that could be a warm hot chocolate. It could be just a chilled one. You can make it, pour it over ice cubes. And just again, you'll see that I refer to a lot of small things, because it's rather like bringing up a child. If you overface your appetite and you say, you're right, you've got to do that, you place a whole plate of food in front of someone, that can be very overfacing, and the body goes, I can't even remotely go near that. But of course, it's our fear that often we want to feed a lot of food to someone, perhaps who's losing a lot of weight, and you're worried that they're deteriorating and becoming too frail. But if you turn it on its head, and rather like the child bit is, if you say to a child, don't do something, far more attractive to do it afterwards. So I say with my patients, just serve something in a small ramekin or a little espresso cup. It could be a little bit of the soup or a little bit of apple puree with a tiny bit of yogurt on top. You look at that and go, well, that's not enough to keep a mouse alive, let alone someone that I care about or myself. But what happens is you have a small amount and then you go, ooh, I quite fancy a little bit more. And it's the progression and it's the culmination of the little bit more that can mount up. And it's rather like the tortoise and the hare scenario that we used to be brought up with children with. And it's often the tortoise that wins, because it's the tortoise that makes the small steps, but you always make progress. So I'd say go for small mouthfuls of little nourishing things that are easy to digest, and see if trying the chocolate trick could just help relax the muscles. Now, during this very tough time, loss of sleep has been a real problem. Of course, things like pain can disrupt our sleep. Our anxiety can disrupt our sleep. Another little trick that I like to do is I like to make lavender milk. Now, you might think something as simple as lavender, which I've grown in the garden, was dry it every year. Of course, we know lavender is soothing in the bath, but in fact, if you just steep, that just means if you just soak the lavender flowers in either normal milk, or you could make it with almond milk, coconut milk, whichever milk you feel comfortable with. I tend to make a big jug, say every few days, and then I keep that in the fridge. And then last thing at night, just have a small glass of the lavender milk. Because that tends to be, it's very soothing, it relaxes our body. And it's often that, it's that Freudian thing that we tend to associate having something that's milky, that gives us that mouthfeel, to then nurture the body and seduce it into a good night's sleep. So lavender milk can be a great way of just nurturing the body into that relaxed state. And if you can be relaxed when you go to sleep, try not to drink too much fluid late at night, because again, if you're a light sleeper, that just means you're more likely to wake up, and that can disturb you. But also trying not to eat late at night. And I know particularly when we're going through tough health challenges, often you like to get to the end of the day and think, right, well, I'll eat with someone I love and care about, and I like to be with them. But in fact, often our guts and our digestive system, whether it's our liver, any of our organs, are more tired at night. And it tends to be just too much effort. And I think that whilst we've had an amazing growth in lovely online recipes, whether that's the BBC Good Food site, there are amazing communities out there, or our recipes on our website, we can imply that we all need to be amazing cooks all of the time. And we cook something and try and eat it late at night. I just say the way I was brought up was that it could be a simple egg on toast. And that old-fashioned thing of just having a boiled egg with some soldiers. Or turn it on its head and have just a bowl of porridge at night. And maybe just tweak and have more to eat either at the beginning of the day, or if you feel most comfortable at lunchtime, have it at lunchtime. And then just have something like a soup or a bit of stewed fruit and a bit of yogurt late at night, because then that's not stressing your gut too much, because you tend to think, oh, I've got to have as much as I can to eat today and then go to sleep. And as if you go to sleep on a full stomach, that's more likely to make you feel really uncomfortable. And then the gut plays trauma, and then you get into that vicious cycle of being exhausted in the morning. And when we come to the types of foods that are good to eat late at night, if you can stomach a little bit more, it could be that you have something that's more starch orientated. So something like a small bowl of pasta, a small bowl of a simple risotto. So that it tends to be those starchy foods that nurture the sleepy hormones within our body. And we could find that I'd serve pasta as the Italians do, and just have a small bowl, and don't have too much of a creamy sauce on it or a fatty sauce on it, because that tends to sit heavily in the gut. So it could be, rather like the Italians, just have the brodo, the broth, with a few pieces of pasta in, and maybe a little bit of shredded chicken, a bit of fresh ginger. That just means that it's a soothing bowl, but you've got the soporific inducing bit of pasta in there, or a bit of rice, and that just nurtures you, seduces your body into a good sleep. Because I think if we get on top of our sleep, we've actually found very exciting research that if we can try and sleep well, we nurture what we call a good microbiome. Now, microbiome sounds a bit scientific, but in fact what it is, it's a good gut bacteria balance in our guts. Now that can firstly make you feel more comfortable in your gut, but also we're seeing that there's quite fascinating research around the microbiome, which is a good bacterial balance, actually supporting our immune system, because they produce natural sort of anti-cancer substances. One particular one is called butyrate, and it brings down what we call inflammation in the body. And if we can bring down inflammation in the body, that then can help support our immune system. Now, you might have noticed that I'm referring to supporting our immune system, because a big bugbear I have in the media, and in whether we're talking about social media and the newspapers, is that we often talk about foods that can boost our immune system. as if it's just a blueberry or a spear of broccoli, that just say if you have this superfood, you're going to have the most amazing immune system. That just isn't true. Of course, those foods are really beneficial, but where the evidence is, and it's really important where we sit where the clinical evidence is that we need a good, nurtured, nourishing diet to support our immune system. So it's not that the more fruits and vegetables you can eat, the better your immune system. We just know that if you can eat, and we think it's about 5 portions of vegetables and fruits a day, but actually in Japan they say it's about 12, but that sounds too much. But it could be that you could do a lovely vegetable soup. That can be a couple of portions. It could be your stewed fruit. So they all mount up. But I would just say that if you can just try and think, cook and eat with your eyes, get a different rainbow, a good selection of vegetables and fruits, they support your immune system. And then another key component is protein. Throughout the years I've looked after families in my practice, one of the most worrying scenarios when you're going through a tough health challenge is that you tend to lose weight very quickly. And you get in that horrible cycle of not wanting to eat much, and then you lose your appetite. And then we become what we call catabolic. Now, to explain that very simply, you might have heard of athletes taking anabolic steroids. So that's medication that actually brings about what we call anabolism. Now, anabolism is muscle buildup. So catabolism is the opposite. So what happens is all our fear or flight hormones, like adrenaline, cortisol, as well as different treatments and some medication like steroids, they make our body become catabolic. So we lose our muscle very quickly. And that's when we tend to become very drawn and we get very worried and we get very weak. So particularly if you have a poor appetite, it can be really good to focus in on the protein-rich foods. Now, that doesn't mean to say you need to go to the protein powders. Let's look at the simple ingredients that are around now that are really economical sources of protein. And you might have remembered I talked about the egg. That's a favourite of mine because it's every amino acid that the body needs in one egg. Now, we used to be very worried that people who have, and those of you who have a poor immune system, shouldn't have any raw eggs. But in fact, that was when we, in this country, had worries over salmonella. Because we worried that if you have a compromised immune system, you need to check with your medical team to see, is there anything specific that you need to avoid? But generally, if we're having eggs that have the lion mark on, that means that the hens have been vaccinated against all the disease that we worry about passing on into the human chain. So if you're making something like a simple scrambled egg, now Andreas, who is our lovely Nourish chef, makes the most delicious scrambled egg, and the recipe is on our website. But very simply, all you need to do is add some cream, single cream or double cream to the scrambled eggs, bit of salt, bit of seasoning, could put some fresh herbs in there, bit of dill, bit of coriander, bit of parsley that gives it a little bit more flavour that could stimulate the appetite. But what you then do is make a very soft, easy, calorific egg. So eggs is a good source of protein. Obviously, you've got your fish, you've got lentils, beans, so something like a simple dal can be fantastic. Now, you might worry that lentils, beans can be too hard to digest, but a trick with that is if you puree, like a white bean soup, sometimes it can be easier to digest than having the whole beans, because it tends to be the whole bean or the lentil. It can be troublesome if you're not particularly used to eating a lot of pulses and lentils. My daughter Maya is from India, so we're used to eating a lot of pulses. So you could be one of those people that you can get away with having a lot of pulses. But if you're not, I just say enjoy the pulses. They're a great source of protein, but just maybe blend them down and then just stir something like some Greek yogurt and maybe a bit of fresh herb to make it look really lovely. And that could be a way that you get some extra protein. Equally, meat and fish and chicken are a good source of protein. And of course, we worry about red meat if it's not good quality, because we worry about trans fats in our body. Now, trans fats are generally the unstable fats. So sort of poor quality, very highly processed meat isn't good for us. But if you like to eat meat, I just say eat good quality meat a couple of times a week, and they can be a great source of protein and iron. And that can be very often a key nutrient when you're trying to build your strength. because low iron stores, which can happen if we're losing blood or if we're getting very depleted from a treatment. If you want to boost your iron through your meat, I just say maybe look at producing a lovely a casserole that's had the meat that's been really slowly cooked for hours so that it literally just melts in your mouth. Or it could be that you make a simple cottage pie or simple shepherd's pie. And then if you mince the meat and mix it in with lovely tomato sauce, that's a good way of getting an easier to digest meat than literally just placing a steak on your plate. And then with chicken, I'd equally say, I was brought a favourite of mine as a child was something called lobby, and that was chicken stew. And that was just with shredded chicken that my mum had had the roast on a Sunday, and then on Monday we'd often have lobby. And that is literally a chicken soup with all the lovely roast vegetables or root vegetables. And that's a lovely way of getting some protein inside your body that, again, isn't a dry piece of chicken breast. So I think just making thin slivers, mincing is a great way of just putting some protein in. Or it could be as simple as having a soup and then you literally whisk an egg. So there are a few ideas. And I've covered a lot in this first live session, but I'd love to come back. But I'd love to know what you'd like to ask me, because you're the community and I'm here. So if you have any questions, maybe a good time now is to post them, because we've got a few more minutes and I'd love to hear what you'd like me to ask. So we've just had a lovely question about mood foods. Now, mood food is rather like the superfood. So again, we tend to see all the articles just say that if you eat this particular food, you'll have a fantastic mood. Of course, foods can have an impact on our brain because it's a muscle. And I'd say that if we're trying to look for foods that maintain a good endorphin level, they rather conveniently are the protein-rich foods. So those foods that have the essential amino acids in, so it can be a diet that's rich in protein, can be good at boosting your endorphin level. And then, of course, you've got your lovely natural good quality sugars that you tend to absorb through the roof of your mouth. But what I'd say is if you've got a bit of a sweet tooth, and lots of people do, and I'd say just try and have the sweet foods after something you've had rich in protein, because then you get a slow absorption of the sugar. The endorphins, which are your happy hormones, get raised, but they only do that in a slow way, which means that then you won't get the horrible crash. So it could be just a little bit of your chocolate, or I don't have much of a sweet tooth, but the sweets I do love are medjool dates and dried figs. And of course, they're a lovely snack to have in your bag for just grabbing those moments when you want something sweet, but you don't want something that's too junky sugared and that can just spike your blood sugar level and then crash it afterwards. So that's the mood foods. Do you have any other questions? So I've just had a question about your immune system and if you are neutropenic. And in fact, I've looked after a few patients today that are neutropenic. Now, neutropenic is when you have low neutrophils. And that generally means that we have to be really careful that we don't have anything in our food that has a risk of food poisoning. So it's really simple that you can just need to cook vegetables and fruits before you eat them. But again, rather like I said with the digestion, it doesn't mean that you have to have everything cold. You could actually, or hot, you can actually play with the temperature. So you can make a simple niçoise salad so that you could cook the French beans, so blanch them so that you've still got a bit of crunch. But it means that you've then, in a way, sterilised them and made them safe to eat. But then you can make a simple salad as long as you're using good quality olive oil, a bit of lemon, a bit of tinned tuna. So you can have that freshness, but you're not taking anything that would risk the fact that you're neutropenic. And hopefully, when your neutropenic state changes, then you can get back to enjoying lovely raw fresh fruits and vegetables, because they're the fruits and the foods that contain vitamin C, which is a fantastic antioxidant. So I've just had a question about flushing out your body in the morning. Now, of course, there are the old traditions that some people like to have hot water and lemon. And it's very interesting when you look at the acidity within a gut, which is something, again, which can be spiked when we're worried or anxious, or certain medication can do that. You might think that you need to avoid all acid producing fruits and vegetables, And of course, when we put a lemon in our mouth, you might think, oh, that's very acidic. But what's interesting, and when you look at other cultures, they tend to find that actually lemon and water can be easy to digest. So you could actually play with lemon in some water. So I tend to think hot water and lemon is a fantastic way to get your body feeling vibrant in the morning. But as everyone in my community knows, I do also love coffee. But I just say have a couple of cups of good quality coffee. And I always tend to have it with a bit of milk because that cushions the caffeine effect. And also it tends to be easier to digest on the gut. And because you could find it if you've got an acidic gut, that too much coffee in the morning just makes you feel really uncomfortable. So I'm not against coffee. I'm a coffee lover. And it's actually, if you suffer with constipation, which can be obviously a side effect of a lot of anti-sickness and pain medication, one of the delicious ways to sort that out is actually a little shot of delicious coffee. So when you're trying to gain weight, one of the areas which is great to focus on is your protein intake, because that builds up your muscle. But also, if you're one of those people that struggles to gain weight, the fats, of course, is a great concentrated source of calories within our diet. And you might be surprised to hear that I say I'm a big fan of fat when it's good quality fat. So that could be your olive oil or coconut oil, butters, creams, cheeses. Cheese would be my desert island food if that's the last thing I have. A gorgeous plate of French cheeses. But of course, we're often taught that fat is bad for you. In fact, it's not. If you have good quality fats and balance that out with vegetables, fruits, all of the other nourishing ingredients, if you're trying to gain weight, I don't see a problem with having good quality fats. The fats that I worry about are the unstable fats, and they're the trans fats. So I'd say if you're going to have fat, have the good quality, try and make it more vegetable based, but equally there's nothing wrong with a bit of cream or butter. And that can be a way of trying to get within a small appetite and a small stomach, because after all, your stomach's tiny, only the size of my fist, or it can be even smaller if it's shrunk. And that can be a good way of trying to get the calories into your body. Where we only tend to worry is that when you get unstable fats, they can break down to produce too much cholesterol. So I just say choose the stable fats, enjoy the lovely oils, and generally that can keep your cholesterol level in check, but also help you to gain some weight. So boosting your circulation. Boosting circulation can be great for healing. So that could be that you've had surgery to an area of your body and you're thinking, what can I do that could boost the circulation to that area? There are a few things you can try with that. Obviously, you want to make sure that your blood supply is plentiful. So we've talked a little bit about iron, because iron actually is one of the pigments or a mineral that influences a pigment in our blood called hemoglobin. So hemoglobin is something that we want a plentiful supply in our blood because that carries oxygen. And obviously, if you don't have enough oxygen around your body, you're not going to be healing any wound that you've got in your extremity. But equally, certain treatments can affect our circulation. But it's a little bit of an old wives' tale to say that certain foods boost your circulation, rather like boosting your immune system. What we tend to find is that if you can have a diet that's rich in antioxidants, so do your vegetables, your fruits, your omega-3s, we haven't talked much about that, but maybe we can talk more about those next time. But ostensibly, they're your oily fish and walnuts. So that you're getting those good, robust fats that take down inflammation, because sometimes it's inflammation in your circulatory system that can compromise its efficacy. So try and take down the inflammation. I'm going to be writing about this later on in the year, and in fact there's some more information on our website about how you can support your immune system. But I just say try and just make your diet as nourishing as possible. And then there are the sort of the soothing teas that could be something like your fresh mint tea. So I've got fresh mint here. But a trick with fresh mint, rather like a lot of teas, is don't have it too strong. Fresh mint is fantastic for soothing the gut, but rather like chamomile, don't have it too strong, because it can actually increase acidity in your body and increase acidity in your stomach, and that can make you feel really uncomfortable. So I'd say have the weak infusions of the teas, and hopefully the warmth in combination of a nourishing diet can help support your immune system and also support your circulation. And probably our final question should be around the gut. And we've had a question about constipation and whether you have irregular bowel movements. And because our gut is our second brain, obviously anxiety exacerbates that even more. So the more anxious you get about things like constipation and not having a great a bowel system, the worse it gets. So I'd say, first of all, try the cooked vegetables and fruits, because sometimes it can be the raw that can aggravate constipation and irregular bowel movements. So I'd say look on our website for different recipes that have low residue and they soothe the gut. But of course, I've talked about low residue, but that's when the gut's really traumatized. If we generally have a very sluggish gut, we often need to boost our fibers. So our fiber we find in vegetables, fruits, but we also find them in whole grains, whole grain rice, granary bread, pulses, lentils, oats. So if you can try and boost those, but I think a lot of people know that. But where we go wrong is we don't have enough liquid around to help those foods swell, because fibrous food is a bit like a dry sponge in our body. And if it stays dry, it's really hard to push through the bowel. Whereas if you put water around, osmosis causes the water to go into the food and it swells into a soft sponge. So that not only does that make it easier to push through the stool, but it also means that those foods can stimulate the bowel. And one thing I'd watch is that a lot of medication you're having to take because of pain meds or different sleeping tablets, different types of medication can make your gut very sluggish. If you suddenly start having a lot of fibrous foods, that can cause a bit of a traffic jam and you can get even more bloated and more uncomfortable. So I just try maybe the low residue for a few days, that they're easy to digest foods, then start to introduce more of your fibers. Make sure you're matching that with lots of fluid. Try and have a good sort of 2.5 litres of fluid. It could be water, could be a herbal infusion, could be a nice nourishing drink. If you can increase your fluid alongside gently increasing the fibers, that should help to get your gut moving in the right direction. And hopefully your constipation is a thing of the past. And of course, I mentioned before, if you're really struggling with constipation, a little shot of coffee in the morning could actually get the bowel to move. So if we've not covered what you'd like me to cover, do get in touch. Get in touch with our communities. Come to our websites. Get in touch with our Nourish community. Come and see our lovely recipes and let us know what you'd like me to talk about next time, because I'm here and I'd love to give you my recipes and ideas and help support and nourish you during these challenging times. And it's been really great to join you in this exciting event. And take care and much love.